So the idea of leaving home was devastating.
Yeah.
But I also like looked at this ultimatum and looked at my life up until that point and went, I can't do this anymore. Like I have no choice.
Right.
I have to leave.
Yeah.
So I left, and I spent the next 8 years learning to like take care of myself and like through a multitude of like couch surfing, and I slept in my car sometimes, and like little part-time jobs here and there. And
if you don't have family support and you're that young,
Yeah.
even though you're an adult, in this society right now, if you're, in your teens, even if it's the late teens, it is so difficult because it's
so hard.
expensive.
Yeah.
There's so many financial things you have to think about, like credit and, all the subscriptions that we have now, everything, all the bills. It's very tough.
Grew up so sheltered that I didn't really
Yeah.
learn a lot of the like nitty gritty stuff about being an adult.
Because you weren't taught that because you were a female.
Right, because I was raised in that evangelical, like it was very much the culture of like you don't date, you court, and then you court someone until you get married, and then your dad hands you off to this other man, and then you don't ever have to like deal with any of that stuff.
It's
right?
almost like you're not a person.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Very much so. So
why would you need to learn anything to take care of yourself?
There's things that I'm still learning these days, like how credit scores work and like how to legally do this or like legally do that.
Does stuff like that surprise you? Like I'm like, oh, I didn't know that.
Right. I'm just trying to do like marketplace insurance. Over the last year, I'm like, this is complicated.
It is complicated.
This is really complicated.
Yeah, I think it's purposefully complicated, actually.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I have trouble with like legalese or like super technical speak anyway. It's gibberish to me. Like I don't understand it. I've had to sit down with people who do understand it and be like, explain this to me because I don't know what's happening.
Yeah.
So I don't remember the original topic. I bunny trailed
So
very easily.
we were talking about like your relationship to your family now that you're a trans person.
Right.
And it sounds like with your mom you almost are like coming back with her, or she's coming back with you.
Very recently, even.
For, she's like growing.
Yeah. Very recently. When I first came out to them, because I went through when I was first exploring my gender, I was like, I'm gender fluid. No, maybe I'm non-binary. And then I came out as a non-binary lesbian. And that's when my relationship ended with my ex-husband. And that was the first time I came out to my folks, is I just told them I was a lesbian.
Okay.
None of the gender stuff.
Sure.
I'm a lesbian.
Well, that's something that people know too.
Yeah.
And it can be boundary setting.
Exactly.
In a way.
Exactly.
It's very like, nope.
There's none of those like extra questions that come with it. It's like, you know what that is.
That's right.
You don't have to ask.
That's right.
Right?
And it's very clear. Like, nope, stop.
Exactly.
Stop with that.
Yeah.
You're not going to give me away to a man.
Yeah. Not happening.
Yeah.
So like that went okay. Like the first time around, right? They were not thrilled.
Yeah.
But I was just gay. It's fine. I'm just gay. Like, it's no big deal. Like,
do you think that's because there's more acceptance of being gay? Okay.
Yeah, because at least, especially here, like in the Midwest and more red states, being gay or lesbian is much more acceptable than being anything else.
Which is amazing, right? Because it didn't used to be that way.
Right.
Yeah, and that took a lot of activism.
Right.
When you say anything else, you mean like in terms of being person of color, that sort of thing?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Like
so a lot of racism?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, Omaha has a big problem with that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
A lot of segregation still.
Okay. Wow.
But when I first came out to them as a lesbian, right, they took it relatively well. Not thrilled, but like, yeah, okay, I guess you're going to do that sort of thing. But there was very much an underlying tone of like, you don't really tell us about what you're doing. We don't really talk about like your love life anymore, or like any people that you're seeing or anyone you're interested in. Was just kind of like, ignore that. It was one of those like, okay, this is a thing about you. We're just going to pretend like it doesn't exist.
Okay. But that means you're not going to be in your child's life at all. Your adult child's life.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. So that was kind of like a little bit of a separation there. Like, great, this is another thing that they don't know about me, and another thing that we're not like, that keeps me distant from them.
And you also don't get the support.
Yeah.
Like being able to talk to your parents about like relationship problems, or, being a parent.
Yeah. Yeah. It was very limiting in a lot of ways.
Right.
I stopped talking to one of my grandfathers over it because he had a lot of trouble with the fact that I was queer in any sense. He really struggled with it, and I kind of stopped talking to him about it.
Okay. Yeah. Sometimes that's the best thing.
Yeah.
Sometimes. Yeah.
It's about like,
you don't want to put up with any abuse, you know, or
yeah,
bad comments.
It was very protective on my end, right?
Yeah.
To make sure that I wasn't exposing myself to people that were going to treat me badly about it.
Right.
So,
yeah.
And then 2021 is when I started testosterone, right?
Okay, yeah.
And
you're smiling there. I'm getting the feeling that you liked that. Yes.
February 18th, 2021.
At 5 p.m.
Exactly. Like I have the time and date listed. Like I have a horoscope, like birth chart for that particular date because that is like my rebirth day, right?
Okay.
So,
Cool. I just remember going and eating a big hamburger.
Yeah.
Because I was really hungry.
A large fry was my food of choice after my first shot. I still identified as non-binary at the time.
Okay.
I was still experimenting.
Yes.
And I realized later on that
that was kind of the first sort of trans identity that you had come across as well.
Yeah, I was very attached to it, you know, because that was like my first foray into I'm not a woman.
Right.
And, you know, non-binary can look like anything.
Yeah.
And I was like, okay, well, I'm going to hold on to this because this identity is comfortable. And it feels like, for now, it feels right.
Yeah.
But I'm not happy with my body. And, like, I clearly have some dysphoria. And there's things that I want that my body cannot do, like give me facial hair. And I'm like, maybe I struggled with the idea of starting testosterone for about a year before I actually started because I was like, what if I don't like it? What if, like, I feel terrible? Like, what if this? What if that? And then one day I was
Those
just
kinds
like,
of questions are answered once you started.
Exactly. That's the moment I had. I was just like, I think I was watching a TikTok of a trans guy.
Sure.
And he was talking about all the changes he went through. And I had this sudden like realization that if I had all of those changes, I wouldn't be mad about it. Well, there is no reason for me to not be doing this.
Okay,
Like, so I just went for it.
Oh, awesome.
And I was on T for about 8 months. 9 months before I actually told anyone.
Oh, really?
I just decided to start.
I can imagine, though, that people saw it, though.
People noticed.
Yeah.
Right? No one said anything.
Yeah.
To me.
Because your face, your like your bone structure, very masculine.
Yeah, my face changed pretty significantly in the first 6 months. My voice started dropping about month 5, I think. I was binding or taping, which not that there was much like bind or tape in the first place, but with the dysphoria helped a lot. So I was like visibly flat chested.
Yeah.
I wore men's clothes.
That's amazing that you didn't tell people around you.
Yeah,
even
I was
though
too scared.
Though you were around some people who were also that way. Yeah.
Right. And I changed my name to a more androgynous name at the time, right? And I just kind of went with it. I didn't tell anyone why I was doing those things. I just kind of
and nobody
let it
asked?
happen. No one asked.
That's so wild.
It blows my mind.
Yeah.
Right? I think with my family it was very much a, well, if we don't ask, then it's not happening.
Okay.
Sort of thing. Because when I did finally,
she just has a cold.
Exactly.
Okay.
She's just butch. She's just really butch.
We know some
with my 5 chin hairs.
We know some ranch women like that.
Yeah.
Which I do actually.
Exactly. Yeah, the farm women in Nebraska.
And
Absolutely.
they are very cis and very straight and not trans at all.
And just very butch.
Very butch.
It happens,
and
right?
They have to be. I mean, they're wrestling cattle and whatever.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And I think with like my tomboy past, my parents especially were just kind of like, we're just not going to touch it.
Okay.
Right?
Yeah.
So it wasn't until I officially like accepted for myself that I was a trans man, because that took me a long time to unpack.
Okay.
Right? Just with...
Not really. I mean, that's pretty quick.
It is pretty quick. All things... My therapist is fantastic.
Okay, good. That's a good plug for therapy. Right.
Find yourself a queer trans therapist.
Yeah.
That is honestly a lifesaver for me. Like,
I
think that's why I got through everything as quickly as I did, because I had someone who understood the experience and like could really hold my hand through it.
Right. And you have, a lot of things to unpack too. I mean, honestly.
Especially with the kind of masculinity that I grew up with, like looking at, I think I might be a man, but this is my idea of what a man is, and this is everything I don't want to be.
And
like,
it's very isolated.
It is.
Yeah.
And like struggling with that for the longest time before I was able to accept it for myself, let alone tell other people I'm a man. Right.
And you didn't tell people like 9 months after taking testosterone.
It wasn't until 9 months in. It was right before the holidays, because I was gonna see family that I hadn't seen in 9 months, and I was like, they're gonna know.
Yeah, they're gonna.
I can't hide it.
Yeah.
So I might as well prepare the people closest to me,
Sure.
so they know.
Right.
And
did you do that so that you could have a little bit of support Like when you had to come out to family, or
That's initially what I was hoping
Okay.
for. Not exactly the way it played out, but I was hoping that at least if I told them ahead of time, I wouldn't get as many awkward questions, and I wouldn't spend like the holiday gatherings explaining myself, right? That I would still be able to spend time with my family instead of being like the freak of nature in the room,
right? And
Instead
your
of feeling like
your
an
kid
exhibit.
having space to just be a kid and enjoy the holidays.
Exactly, because I knew that was going to be a question because we had just switched over from him calling me mom to calling me papa.
Okay.
So I knew.
And what was that like?
So good.
Yeah?
So good.
Cool.
I really wanted to be dad, but my ex was like, no, I'm dad.
Okay.
I'm like, all right. You can have that one.
Okay. Okay, manly man, or whatever.
Kind of. I was like, all right, I'm not going to fight you on this one. We're just...
Okay.
Okay.
Papa's cool, though.
So I went with Papa. It's near and dear to my heart.
Yes.
So he just switched over to calling me Papa. So I'm like, he's going to call me Papa in front of people.
Okay.
They're going to have questions. So I might as well
Or
just
maybe not.
Or maybe not. Just like, I might as well just tell people, right?
Yeah.
Because I'm going to have to mention it at some point. Because it's becoming more and more obvious.
Yeah. Had you changed your name officially, or just as like a nickname that people knew you as?
Kind of both.
Okay.
About that time, like probably a couple months before I came out to my family, I had switched from the more androgynous name that I was using to Grant.
Okay.
So I was officially like...
Grant is a great name, by the way.
Thank you.
I don't know a lot of people who name that.
Yeah. I don't even remember how I came across it. I just like found it and was like, that's it.
Yeah.
That's it. That's my name.
There you go.
Absolutely.
There you go.
So I knew that I couldn't go through the holidays being called my birth name anymore because it was already hard enough when I had changed my name to a more androgynous name. Like that was my third name that I had been in on, right? And I couldn't fathom.
It's interesting how like you can live away for a long time and then things kind of ball up and then you just cannot do it anymore. Yeah.
Yeah, it had been balling up for like 3 years at that point, and I couldn't fathom going through the holidays knowing who I was and the way that I looked and the way I carried myself and like the titles I use and the pronouns I use and being called the wrong thing.
Yep.
And being seen as the wrong person.
Yeah.
It was it was too much for me. Yeah.
Enough.
I couldn't do it.
Yeah.
So I told them.
Yeah.
And it was very much like my dad and I have not spoken of it since.
Wow.
Like he knows. He still calls me by my birth name and my old pronouns, and
that's
I
hurtful.
don't know at this point if it's just like willful ignorance or if he like genuinely.
Well, it kind of sounds like it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's it's complicated because I'm like, does he not do it because he never talks about me? So he never has like an opportunity to practice.
So he's not used to it.
Right.
Yeah.
I'm not sure if it's because he's not used to it because he never actually uses it, or if it's just he's clinging to the old me and he's not willing to like let that go.
Yeah.
Right? Because I'm the only girl was the only girl in my family. There was a lot of like significance put on that.
Right.
So it's complicated. I don't know. And then my mom has started actually using my name within the last like 6 months.
Mom, you're doing good.
She's doing real good. Like when I first came out to them, she avoided using my name or pronouns in conversation for the longest time. And I think that was because she was so afraid of like getting them wrong or because she wasn't used to it. But because she didn't use them at all, like anything for me, it took her a long time to like switch over.
Okay. So she just wasn't practicing with you.
Yeah.
Okay.
And she's still really shy about calling me he, which, you know what? I'll give her that. She was set in her ways for a very long time. And she's just now like getting out of that. So,
well, it sounds like she's really getting out of it. I mean, if she's changing how she thinks about her spirituality, for instance.
Yeah.
I mean, that's a really big deal.
she's been changing in ways that I did not expect.
Yeah.
Like massive ways that I did not expect.
Because that's all about community too. And all of the elders around her in her church spaces.
Oh, yeah.
And, I mean, that's big. That's really big.
Yeah, and she was like a big fixture. She's a counselor. So that was like a big part of her work.
Okay.
Was like her spirituality and God. And like it's still a part of her work, but in a completely different way.
Yeah.
And we've talked like...
It's almost like she's gone to like from fundamentalist to like hippie lady or something.
Kind of, yeah. Yeah, she's got like
Not to put any labels on you, but you know.
It's kind of true though. She's got like a collection of singing bowls, and she's like recently really gotten into crystals and like vibrational frequencies and stuff. And I'm like, you know what, Mom, I can dig that. I'm into this. I am into this. Let's do it. Like,
that's awesome. I mean, people make fun of that a little bit, you know, especially when white people will do it. It's going to be, you know, appropriation and that sort of thing.
Right.
But I kind of like it that she's doing that. That's cool.
I think it's fantastic. It's like I've been a pagan for a really long time, so it's like this nice little in between from where we were on the opposite ends of things.
Yes.
Like I feel a little bit closer to her in that aspect because I don't have to hide that quite as much. Like we'll talk about last Christmas, I gave her like a chunk of malachite for Christmas, and she was thrilled about it. And we sat and talked about crystals for like 20 minutes. It was great.
Wow.
It's fantastic.
So speaking of that, you didn't bring that up before. What? What is this paganism thing you're speaking of?
Yeah, paganism.
Because that's very broad.
It is very broad. I first came across the idea of like paganism in general, but specifically Wicca.
Okay.
Back in the 90s.
The evils of the internet.
Exactly. Well, it was the evils of the internet, and ironically enough, the evangelical church that introduced me to it.
Okay.
Because
like a little tracks.
Yeah, kind of.
Okay.
Yeah, like those little cartoon church tracks, right? They were like really dramatic and like
you're
wild.
Being thrown into the lake of fire.
Exactly, like those kind of things.
Yes.
And at first I was just like, these are really weird. I don't like why the dramatics for all of this. Like this is really overblown.
It's pretty crude.
Right. Yeah. And then there was a point of time where my church was really into like faith healing ministries like Joyce Myers and Benny Hinn and that sort of thing. It was very much like the evangelical, like we invite, like the shaking and that kind of stuff.
Oh my goodness!
I know, it's so exciting.
You. I'm sorry. I actually grew up in somewhat of a faith healing tradition as well.
Yeah.
Hey, Bubba. Yeah, I know. That's scary.
I know. I'm so sorry.
I know.
Hi.
It's okay. He's coming for a little reassurance there. Yeah, it's all right. Christian Science.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, but it's a little bit different. It's less dramatic looking.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. The evangelicalism that I grew up with was pretty dramatic in that sense. And there was a whole series of a couple of years where our church was really
Those are almost like rock stars of that whole scene too.
Yeah. It was very much that sort of thing. And there was a whole like 2 or 3 years where they were super into like the evangelical proselytizing, like the going door to door. Like there were a couple conferences that we went to where they taught you how to like witness to people, and then they would send you out in groups.
Oh no!
Like on the pretense of like collecting canned food or something, and then telling people about Jesus and trying to bring people into the fold. Like that's the kind of evangelicalism I grew up with.
Okay.
Right. So like very, very out there.
Yeah.
And so there were a couple conferences that we went to where they would teach you about other religions so you knew how to argue against them to people. And that's where I was introduced to Wicca. And I remember we had this book that was like a primer on all the basic like big false religions.
Okay.
Right? And it had like...
I would love to read that. That sounds fascinating.
I might still have it somewhere. I think I might have kept it like for nostalgia purposes. Yeah. Because that was my first foray.
Well, it's going to go with your papers when they are archived. Yes.
So it had like... It had some actual cults in there that it talked about. It talked about Christian Science. It talked about Mormonism. It talked about like Islam.
Is Christian Science considered a cult?
Within our denomination,
it makes sense.
Yeah.
I get it.
It covered Wicca, in general paganism, Islam, that sort of thing. It had like a bit of a nod to Judaism, which I personally took really offense to because like culturally I'm Jewish. Like my mom's family is Ashkenazi. So
and Judaism is the basis of
that's like what Christianity was born from.
Yeah, it's the old religion.
Yeah, like wild.
Yeah,
absolutely wild. Which is like an extra layer of irony, considering that I spent a couple of years.
Jesus was a Jew.
I spent a couple of years going to synagogue with my mom when she was like kind of exploring Judaism as a faith again. When I was like 8 or 9 or something like that, and I really loved it, and like I still have a great affinity for it. I still go to synagogue occasionally, just like because it feels like home.
And the community and the holidays and the focus on being together and thinking about history and I mean it's really quite it's like there's
beautiful. A whole basis in Judaism where the premise of the spirituality is you question everything.
Yeah.
You question God himself.
Exactly.
Like, you do not just take everything at face value, and that's what I loved
it's
about
built
it.
in. Yes.
Like, that sort of back and forth, and that, like, well, let's talk about it. Let's figure it out. Let's,
That's right.
not just accept a thing for what someone says.
That's right.
Because one person is fallible.
That's right.
Which I loved.
Yeah. Yeah, it's like a community dialogue that's been going on for 5,000 years.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah, yeah.
So
less rigid than what you grew up with, which was like this.
absolutely. But it still had, like, the ritual and, like, the,
What had the ritual?
mysticism to it. Judaism had, like, ritual and, like, a little bit of mysticism to it. Like, holy symbols and, you know, like, traditions and folklore and that sort of thing, which is always something that I've been really interested in. Like, I was one of those queer kids that was really into, like, Greek and Roman like religion and, like, old Egypt and, like, the Norse and that sort of thing when I was growing up.
Right.
And so in this primer of false religions and reading about them, I found myself, like, really drawn to Wicca. I'm like, this is really interesting.
Yes.
Like, I like this ritual and this crafting and this, like, magic. Like, this
And intention.
exactly. Like, you do things with such intention, and it's not, here's your rule book for doing things.
Yes.
It's like, here's a way to experience the world differently. And I was like, this is fascinating.
And being in the world very strongly and taking care of the world.
Exactly. Everything is interconnected, right? And it resonated with me really strongly. So I would, like...
Sometimes I worry about Christians and the separation of them from the world in a way.
There's such a separation there. It's really disconnected from everything, honestly, you know? And so I used to try and get my hands on as much, like, false religion propaganda as much as I could growing up, because I was hoping I would find more stuff about witchcraft and Wicca. And...
I have a story for you after this, but
yes.
I cannot put this on record. But anyway, please go.
So it was one of those things that I had to, like, very much keep under wraps, because if my family knew that I was interested in that, like, genuinely, it would have been a big problem.
Oh,
right?
Would you have been sent to a camp, like a Christian camp or something?
I mean, it's entirely possible. There was a point in time where they didn't like my behavior, so they sent me to live with a pastor friend and his family in a different state for a summer. Oh, like, to try and, like, shape me up, sort of thing.
So they did try that. They did try that.
Yeah, on a smaller scale. Yeah, absolutely. So I just, like, very much didn't talk about it. I was really big into writing at the time.
So you knew.
So I knew, and my way of interacting with it at the time was I had created, like, this whole fantasy world, and I, like, wrote my own system of magic, and, like, that was my way of, like, learning about it, was reading this stuff and then, like, trying to, like, recreate it in this other sense, and it was all masked under creative writing, so it was fine, right?
Right.
So when I left home, within the first month, I went to the local metaphysical shop and I bought my first tarot deck.
Yep.
And I bought a bunch of candles. And
those places, those little shops are more than just shops.
Yeah.
They're kind of like community centers.
Yeah.
It's where you connect with people.
Absolutely. Like, I went in there and I was like, I want a tarot deck. And they're like, great, let's show you some beginner ones. Like, here's some resources. Like, here's some basic stuff for, like, practicing Wicca on your own. Like, I found books at thrift stores. I read voraciously everything. Like, probably 7 or 8 different branches of paganism and witchcraft, like, different schools of thought. And, like, I learned over time that, like, Silver Ravenwolf, not good. Not good.
Yeah,
Racist,
I don't know.
Sexist.
I don't know anything about the lineages. Just very cursory knowledge that, there's some problems and that there's different ones. And that's why there was a reaction of, like, Dianic, for instance.
Yeah,
pulling
absolutely.
away.
Yeah, because that, like, late 80s to early 90s Wicca witchcraft was very racist, very sexist, like, very sacred god and goddess in a very cishet sort of way. It was, like, really aggressively so. And it was very exclusionary to a lot of people.
Yeah, and they would talk about sex that way, too.
Yeah.
It permeated all parts of life.
Oh, absolutely. It was very problematic. And that's what I started with, because I didn't know any better, right? And that was the only resources I had.
It was almost like shades of what you'd grown up with.
It's like the witchcraft version of the evangelical Christian that I grew up with, right? So it was familiar enough that I was like, I can do this. And the more I read and the more I learned, the more I realized, well, this is not good.
Yeah, right.
Like, let's shift a little bit here.
It's interesting though, because you really have to almost search sometimes to notice these things, because they will be subtle about it sometimes.
Yes.
And then you're like, holy crap, that's what's going on. This is racist. You know? And for you out there, you might not, you know, it may seem like, oh, don't you just notice that something is racism? But people use different language that hides their racism.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I grew up so sheltered that I realize now a lot of the beliefs that I carried was a lot of like internalized racism and like internalized in the sense that I didn't know it was, right? That it was just part of my worldview. Right. And then as the more I was out in the world and the more people I met and the more community I got involved in, the more I realized I'm like, oh, this is bad.
Yeah. Yeah. It's so painful when I notice those things come up too. I'm like, you know,
yeah, it's so hard.
But you have to deal with it, even though it's painful and you feel like stupid and maybe you hurt somebody. Yeah. You know, that's even worse, right?
Oh yeah.
So but when you grow up isolated, it's not an excuse.
No, it's not an excuse.
But it's something that you have to keep in mind.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And it's such a difficult process.
Yeah, it's like a lifetime fucking process.
It is, because it's so layered. Yeah. Like there's things that I still say to these days where I say it and I'm like, hold on a minute. That doesn't sound right. Like, and it's the catching. You got to catch yourself all the time. Yeah. And it's, you know, such a process. Yeah. But the foray into paganism, started when I was 19, when I first went to the shop and bought my first deck.
Was it, you were thinking about going solo, or were you looking for community?
A little bit of both.
Okay.
My first foray into looking for community, unfortunately, landed me in some bad situations.
Okay.
With manipulative and abusive people.
Okay.
Like that whole early 90s idea of covens, where it's really just an excuse for people to take advantage of and abuse other people.
Yes.
I fell into that kind
especially
of thing.
Sexually too.
Yeah. 100%.
Yeah.
And that's what I initially fell into. Not super hardcore, but enough that it messed me up for a while, right? And so I decided...
And Christians do this too.
Oh, 100%. It's in every religion, right? And I think it's very predominant in witchcraft, because a lot of the late 90s Wicca was based on that kind of thing. It was the whole sex magic idea was very strong. So that's where a lot of the schools of thought that I started learning about kind of came from. So it was a very forefront sort of thing for it. Right?
Okay.
So it landed me in some bad situations at first. And I decided to go solo, for lack of a better term.
Okay. And let's take a break, because my dog needs to go out, actually.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay, so before we took a little break, you were talking about some of the bad aspects of coming into Wicca, or different lineages of Wicca, which involve some abuse and racism and sex, pretty heavy sexism.
Right.
Were there people that you did connect with eventually?
Yeah, actually there were.
Community?
Yeah. My best friend, who is the one who came out to me as non-binary.
Oh, okay.
Right before I started questioning. Yeah, it was really...
I want to meet this person.
They're fantastic. I love them to death. They're also they don't really call themselves pagan necessarily, but they practice in a lot of the same sort of things, right? We both call ourselves the laziest witches in existence, because we hold a lot of beliefs and we practice when we can, but we're not super stringent about it, right?
I call myself eclectic.
Yeah, that's a word that we use a lot too. Yeah. Yep. Yeah, which I like a lot. And we both realized that we were eclectic around the same time when we started, because I started talking to them about tarot, and they were like, I do that too. I'm like, do you now? So we started comparing notes, and then realized we're both kind of eclectic in the same sort of circles, where we try not to pick up anything that's a closed religion, and some of the stuff that we gravitate towards is the same, and so we're similar veins of eclectic pagans, right?
Okay, great.
So I found some community there.
Yeah, it's very syncretic too, because those traditions were disrupted.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah.
And my partner is also, I don't think they call themselves pagan necessarily, but acknowledge that they practice witchcraft of a kind, right? So...
And there are pagan aspects to our holidays here in the United States.
Exactly.
So it is actually part of our culture.
Exactly. And I've started to dip my toes into Kabbalah a little bit because it's the Jewish mysticism, which feels culturally very close.
Okay.
Right? And that's like something that it takes a lot of study and a lot of practice, and like finding resources on it are hard sometimes.
Right.
But I've started to reach out to some people who I know are like practitioners who have more information, who might be able to actually help me like get started on it, sort of thing. So,
and it must be hard to do that because you have to kind of gain people's trust, and then you have to. It's not quite like gatekeeping, but more like, hey, I'm earnestly or sincerely interested in this.
Yeah.
In this.
Yeah, 100%. It's because, like you said, it's not gatekeeping, but it's like making sure that the people who are being entrusted with the knowledge are not just gonna like appropriate it or just like fuck off with it, for lack of a better term.
Be disrespectful or
exactly.
Misconstrue it or use it to make money or something. Something weird.
Exactly that.
Yeah.
Like when I first started like dipping my toes into Kabbalah and Jewish mysticism again, I started wearing an evil eye earring. And it took a lot of research before I even touched it because I was like, I want to make sure that I'm not appropriating this in some way, even though that being a Jew is my culture. Like culturally, it is my heritage. Yeah. But I don't want to just be like, oh, I'm Jewish, so I get to wear this. It's not. There's more significance to it than that. So I waited until I had like done my research and I was actually like considered myself part of the community and before I started taking on something like that. Yeah. So
that's cool. That's cool. You had that sensitivity to do that. Also, the bigger questions around that about appropriation. Yeah. And I was wondering, and I did interrupt you a couple times there when you brought it up. Just, I don't know why. Sometimes I do that. Sometimes it's annoying, I'm sure. It's okay. I'm just so interested in certain things. So I'm like, but what about this? But you did mention tarot a few times there. And so I was wondering why you like that so much.
Right.
Yeah.
It was very much a focal point in my introduction into paganism.
Okay.
It had always fascinated me, like this idea that you could, crudely put it, tell the future.
Sure.
Right?
Okay.
And for so much of my life, I was so uncertain about so many things. So this idea that I could like pull cards and have them tell me what was going to happen was like very attractive.
Yeah. And some people might consider part of that also divination.
Exactly. Yeah. I've dabbled in a lot of divination practices. I did like tea leaf reading. I did some palm reading. I did tarot. I have like rune sets. I have like a couple different schools of rune sets, like witches runes and Norse runes and like other ones.
Oh, wow. You're
like,
really going for it there.
Divination is my jam.
Wow.
Right?
Wow.
And like I did like smoke divination. I tried like water scrying, like mirrors.
I don't even know what some of this is.
I delved into all of it.
All right. Wow.
But the one that remains near and dear to my heart is tarot.
Oh wow.
And
that's really the most accessible one.
It really is.
Yeah.
And I think it's a combination of like the artwork of the decks, which is just absolutely beautiful. And you can find a tarot deck for anything.
Yeah, and they've really come out with some really beautiful ones and interesting ones. Yeah.
But despite like the artwork and the variations, the core concept is still the same.
Okay.
So if you know tarot, you can pick up pretty much any deck and read it, which is I think is amazing.
I was wondering too, and this is from my complete ignorance.
Yeah.
Is the tarot deck related to like playing card decks?
It is.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
Tarot was originally a card game. Before it was any sort of divination tool, it was just a card game that people would play. You can actually do divination and like a version of tarot with playing cards. Yeah. Which like I have a specific deck that I use for divination because the suits relate to like the pip cards, the smaller suits in tarot.
Okay.
So like there's overlap, so you can read it like without the major arcana.
What is major arcana?
The major arcana are the cards like death, the lovers, justice, the world, like the wheel of fortune.
Okay. And these are kind of like big concepts too.
Yeah, those are big overarching concepts. And then the smaller suits are like each suit is a concept, and then there's like the 1 through 10 and then the royalty cards for each suit, which are like different pieces within the concepts, right? It's like a journey within each concept, and then you have the big overarching ones. Okay. So it gives you like a really broad picture, so you can ask like really specific questions and get really specific answers.
Okay.
But the thing I like about...
I know some people who've done that for like decades.
Yeah. It's fascinating. Like, the thing about tarot is, what really endeared me to it is the fact that it's not telling the future. It's not pulling cards and being like, this is what's going to happen. Because the future is fluid, and no matter what you do, it'll change. Like, nothing is set in stone. In addition to that, reading tarot is based off of your intuition. So if you pull certain cards, you're going to interpret them certain ways depending on where you're at mentally, emotionally, where you are in your life. It's going to mean different things.
So it kind of almost brings something out in you.
Exactly.
Okay.
Divination is a tool to understand.
Okay.
Either yourself or your surroundings or the way that you're interpreting things. It's more of like an introspection tool more than anything. And it's about reading patterns too. And this is the part that I find interesting about it, is because I have a weird relationship with the idea of like magic in general.
Okay.
As to whether or not it's like, is it actually mystical forces or like, energy or something, or is it just the way we're interpreting the world? Like, what's the difference?
Because you're very skeptical the way that you look at things. Yeah.
I'm really skeptical.
And I don't mean that in a negative sense.
Yeah. No, it's just like who I am as a person, right? So like, I exist in that weird place of like, science is magic and magic is science, and it just depends on how you interpret it and like the way you see things.
It almost sounds like you're kind of agnostic
a little
about
bit.
The kind of woo-woo part.
A little bit. Yeah.
I don't know how to put that.
No,
Sorry.
It's true though. It's true though. I spent a lot of years trying to like work with specific deities and connect with specific deities, and I never could, and I didn't like. For me personally, it never worked, and I did not understand why, because I knew a lot of other pagans and a lot of other like people who practice witchcraft who did connect with deities and like believed very strongly about it and were convicted, and like, I don't understand why this isn't happening for me.
I see.
So I kind of settled on the universe as a whole, right?
Okay.
Like the big overarching concept. It does not come
kind of like
into
your
my
mom.
Kind of like my mom. It does not come into my daily life and change things, but it just overall kind of influences things, right? So. Oh man, I forgot where I was going with this.
It's okay.
I got really excited.
It's okay. Actually, there's a siren going by, so we can take a break first.
Okay.
Okay, we were just talking because he lost his track of thought, and I don't know how you would put it, but I put it, and I've done this several times during this project, but I've cut it out. What I do is I get in the motion of a memory, and then I forget what I'm going to talk about.
Yes.
So.
I got on a bunny trail there and I got really distracted.
Yes. And there was a siren too, so
yes.
We took a little break.
So tarot is near and dear to my heart because like that whole idea of divination being, the future is fluid, not set in stone. You read things with your intuition.
It sounds like you don't have to deal with other people's bullshit too, which is something you've dealt with for a long time.
Exactly.
Yeah.
100%. But tarot is also about reading patterns, which I really like. Like that's a thing that served me well in my life.
Yeah.
And the part that like makes me wonder sometimes when it comes to tarot is, yes, it's about intuition and the way you interpret things and reading patterns, but also sometimes it's just like, how did it know? Why is that the card that came up? The number of times that I've done a reading for myself and just wanted to like throw the deck across the room because like, stop being obvious. I know. Like, I know this is a thing.
Like leave me alone already.
Yes. Like, I like to joke that one of my decks in particular is very blunt.
Okay.
And if I'm like...
They have personalities, I guess.
They weirdly...
Oh, okay.
Like, each deck reads a little bit differently. And I have one deck in particular that if I ask it a question, I better be ready for an honest answer that's going to hurt because it's going to give it to me.
That's that friend who's like... If you're going to ask me a question, I'm going to hurt your feelings.
Yep, I'm going to tell you the truth, but I'm
right.
going to hurt your feelings. I have a deck like that.
Okay.
It's like, sometimes I can't explain it, right? Because I know it's about the intuition and reading into it, like for the place and time that I'm at and the situation that I'm in. And also...
But that's nice that you know what deck to go to when you need it.
Yeah, it's nice to have that kind of like, well, if I need a softer answer, I can ask this one. If I need someone to just like really tell it to me straight, I go with this one, right? And the thing that like not confuses me about it, but makes me like take a step back sometimes when I'm doing tarot is when I do it for other people, because the amount of times in my life that I have read for someone else, not knowing a single thing about them and have them sit there and be like, how did you know? I'm like, I have no idea. I feel like I'm just spouting words at you and you're like having a revelation and I don't know what's happening.
Yes.
But clearly it's something you needed to hear.
Yeah.
Right?
Right.
Like it
that sounds cool.
my mind. It's fascinating. When I was in my early 20s.
Is that something you do a lot or just
not as much these days?
Like special kind of occasion?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. I found a lot of people, it kind of makes them uncomfortable, honestly.
Well, you're that honest friend.
Yeah.
Uh-oh.
Like, there was once...
Now I have to deal with my shit.
Exactly. Like, I'm just going to tell it to you like it is. Like, and then at least this way I could be like, it's the cards.
Yes, that's right. That's just what they say.
I'm just telling you what the cards say, man. Like,
that's great.
Like, when I was in my early 20s, this one guy that I had dated worked overnight at a gas station. And I used to, like, go and hang out with him while he was on shift. And there was one time that I was practicing reading cards, just sitting at, like, a table, just doing stuff.
Yeah.
And this trucker came in.
Oh, you were out in public doing
I was out in
this?
public, right?
Oh.
It was an overnight gas station, though. So people would wander in, like, once every hour or two, and that was about it.
All right. Like a truck stop or something?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So there was this trucker that came in.
Why were you at a truck stop?
Because that's where my boyfriend worked at the time. So
Okay.
I was hanging out with him to keep him company,
All
right? So
okay. I was like, what? That's like a scene from a movie.
that is the point in my life that I would have done something like that. But
Yeah.
like,
That's like a scene from a movie.
I did some weird shit in my early 20s.
Okay.
But I was just like practicing cards. I was just like going through and reviewing things, just kind of messing around.
Yeah.
And this trucker came in and saw it and was like, what are you doing? Like, you know, just curious, asking questions. So I told him like, oh, it's tarot. What's tarot? I'm like, oh, it's like a fortune telling kind of thing. You know, you ask it a question and then it tells you an answer. And he like just sat down at my table and was like,
Hey, buddy.
like, read me. I was
Yeah.
like, you sure? Because I was new to tarot too. I'm like, I'm gonna have to like consult the book because I don't have everything memorized yet. Like,
Was he like a big guy too?
kind of, yeah.
Okay.
Like, it was kind of like I was kind of taken aback by it.
Sure.
Like, why would you just ask us? Okay, sure, why not?
Sure.
So I read him his cards, and I had no idea. Like, this is a complete stranger, and
Yeah.
I pulled cards I had never seen before, like I'd never pulled before, and like it told a story,
Yeah.
and I felt like I was just talking at him. Like I wasn't even quite sure what I was saying.
Was he kind of stoic, like just
A
kind of
little bit.
listening?
Yeah. And like I finished, and I was like feeling kind of self-conscious about it, and
Right.
I'm like, I don't
'Cause
know
you're
if that
putting yourself out there.
right. It was like, I don't know if any of this resonates with you.
Yeah,
you know,
yeah.
take what resonates, leave what doesn't, sort of thing, right? Just take it with a grain of salt.
Yeah.
You know, nothing's
yeah.
set in stone.
Right.
And he sat there like for a good 2 or 3 minutes in silence, and I'm like,
Oh my.
am I gonna get hate crime?
Right. Yeah, I know. I know.
A little bit of panic here.
I know.
What's
That's
going
what I was
on?
thinking.
When he finally spoke, he was like, "How did you know?" I'm like, know what?
Yeah.
I don't know. And then he proceeded to like, not with a whole lot of specifics, but explain some of the circumstances around some of the cards that I had pulled. And I was like, how in the hell did that happen?
Yeah. That's cool too that he was so giving
Right.
by explaining why he was affected.
Like, I think both of us were just flabbergasted at that point, that like it was that accurate.
Yeah.
And like, that experience has stuck with me for years at this point. It's been like a decade at least. And I'm just, to this day, I'm like, this is why I keep doing tarot, for moments like that, either with other people or with myself.
Yeah.
Because that moment of like clarity, because even if you knew, having a physical tool to confirm it is so useful and like so validating.
This might be a strange question, but
Yeah.
do you keep doing this in order to get back to that moment or a similar moment?
I think
Or
sometimes,
are you not like goal oriented like that?
I think sometimes I chase that feeling. That feeling of like, holy shit, it makes sense. Like all these pieces that didn't make sense suddenly make sense. Like
Yeah.
I chase that moment of understanding in a lot of things in my life.
Yeah.
But I really enjoy having tools like tarot that help me like really focus that, right? And get a clear and concise sort of answer. And maybe
Yeah.
if I don't understand it at the time, it will make sense at some point.
Yeah. And that's so, it's like you're making a cosmic connection with like a total stranger who's very different from you.
Yes.
In this kind of odd setting, you know, I'm actually kind of a little bit flabbergasted. That's why I'm asking if you chase that feeling, because I've had, like, not with tarot, but similar experiences, which I would say were kind of extraordinary. And you can't, I feel like for me, I can't really chase them because they happened without my kind of trying so much. But who knows? Maybe tarot and some practices are a way where you can focus to get there.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Like you said, I'm very skeptical about the kind of woo-woo side of things.
Yeah.
But there's been moments like that, and some other experiences early in my like days of learning witchcraft. And I'm like, there is no explanation.
Yeah, and
I don't know what to tell you.
And you impacted somebody else. Yeah.
It's wild.
Yeah. How did you two part, by the way, in that evening where you were talking like this?
He just kind of sat there for a little while and asked me a couple of questions about like a couple of the cards. And then he got up and he left.
Okay.
Like he just went and got his gas and he left. And like,
just matter of fact. Okay.
Yeah. I still think about him all the time. Like, I wonder what happened to him.
Right.
Like,
right. Yeah. I've had some similar experience where you meet a stranger and you have like a really deep conversation suddenly, like at the bus stop or something.
Yeah.
And then you never see them again. And it's like, whoa, what just happened?
Yeah. It always happens in those like liminal spaces, like a truck stop in the middle of the night, or a bus stop, or like a diner at 3 a.m, or something like that.
I love it that you brought up the word liminal. I love that word.
I do too.
Yeah, I love that word. I love L words too, like not like lesbian, like that TV show, but yeah, that was a little dorky. But I like. Maybe it's because my grandma's name was Layla. Yeah. Yeah. And there's something flowing about L words that I like. Anyway, what else should we talk about? How about what is going on, I guess, in this state in terms of politics and how that relates to your life, or maybe, your community, your closer community.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. I've talked a lot about that, with some people here in the Midwest.
Over the last, I think it's been 6 months.
Could you speak up, by the way?
Yeah. Maybe less than 6 months. I have a hard time keeping track of time. One of our senators, Megan Hunt, campaigned an entire filibuster during the Senate session to keep anything else from passing, because any bills, any like legislature.
Okay. Any anti-trans in particular, or
anything? She put a full stop on the entire works.
Okay.
Of doing anything, because there was a bill introduced, the Let Them Grow Act, to ban gender-affirming care of any kind for people under the age of 19.
Okay.
Specifically focusing on, not hormone replacement therapy, gender-affirming surgeries.
Sure.
Which are not happening under the age of 19.
Right.
Right? But they're very focused on, like, this is a thing that we need to ban, and then, like, just kind of slid in there gender-affirming care of any kind.
Right.
And it's one of those bans that would, like, if you are depressed, if you have anxiety, like, then you're not eligible for gender-affirming care because you're not stable enough for it, with, like, completely disregarding the fact that gender-affirming care helps negate, like,
alleviate.
Alleviate, thank you. Alleviate the, like, depression and anxiety and, like, that comes with dysphoria and being perceived wrong.
Right.
And
although people can have other issues, with depression, that some sort of thing, but it shouldn't bar people from getting different kinds of health care. If somebody has an affective disorder, or they're going through a period of time when they are grieving or have depression. Yeah.
100%. Yeah. And like the fact that gender affirming care reduces like the risk of suicide by like 70%.
Oh, okay.
Something incredibly high, especially in minors.
Okay.
Particularly in minors.
Yeah.
There was so much talk on the legislative floor because Megan Hunt, our senator who filibustered the whole thing.
Is she, I'm assuming, a Democrat or?
A Democrat, yeah.
Would she be progressive or?
For Nebraska.
Okay.
Yeah.
So middle of the road, probably Democrat.
I think she's pretty far left as far as like Nebraskans are considered, right? And I think part of that is because she's very open about the fact that she has a trans son.
Okay.
Right? Which is part of the reason she fought for this so hard, because he's still a minor, and like this directly affects someone that she loves, and she was not about to just stand by and let this happen.
Right.
So
recently I've talked to some parents and they are fired up because these laws are targeting their kids. Yeah.
It's taking away a parent's right to care for their child, really, is what it comes down to.
So if you'll notice, I now have a lozenge in my mouth because I had a coughing fit because, I don't know, my throat got sore or something. I don't know. It was the first time that had happened in an interview. I have had that happen on dates, though. So at least this wasn't a date. Oh, my goodness. That can be so embarrassing. Anyway, so we were talking about a local politician who, for the Democrats, is kind of just center Democrat, but for here, very leftist or progressive, you would say.
As far as I know. I'm not super familiar with her politics, but the fact that she has been fighting so hard to keep people's rights is
and
honestly impressive.
You were saying she was filibustering the entire legislative session.
Yes.
They couldn't work on anything.
Yes. She refused to back down as long as the Let Them Grow Act was on the table. Unless they took it back.
The names for these things are so dumb.
Yeah. I mean, let them grow. Okay.
So dramatic. Yeah.
Feelings about it.
Yeah, you're a parent.
Yeah.
You know?
I mean, like, my kid, right? He's only 6.
Yeah.
And he, like, we talk a lot about gender because he is old. Like, I transitioned when he was young enough that I don't know if he remembers that I used to be a woman necessarily, but he's seen pictures. Yeah. And he's asked in, like, the recent year or so, like, are you my mom? Okay. I'll be like, well, no, buddy, I used to be your mom, but now I'm your papa. And, like, he doesn't ask real pointed questions, but we've talked about how, like, well, I grew you. And, like, I grew you in my belly. And he'll be like, I'm going to have a baby someday. I'm like, well, kiddo, you weren't born with that organ. So, like...
Also, you know, I mean, you're talking to a child. So this is, you know, appropriate, you know, kind of language for talking to a child.
Exactly. So, like, he's well aware that, you know, I was mom and now I'm papa and I grew you, and like some boys can have babies and some boys can't, and it just depends on what parts you're born with. And like some girls can have babies and some girls can't, and it just depends.
And some do and some don't want to.
Yeah, and it's like a very wide and varied thing. Yeah. And so he's well aware, and like my best friend who's non-binary is his auntie, and like he knows that they're not a girl and they're not a boy. And
and they're an auntie too.
And they're auntie, yeah.
Oh, that's cool.
It's great.
Yeah.
So he's aware, right, of like a spectrum. Yeah. And I've asked him several times if like, do you feel like you're a boy? Do you feel like you're a girl? Like what do you feel like? And like, do you feel like both? Do you feel like neither? Like, because he's very attached to having long hair. Okay. And there was a point in time where he'd be like, I'm a girl because I have long hair. I'm like, okay, well, are you saying that because you only know girls who have long hair? Or are you saying that because you feel like a girl and long hair makes you feel like a girl? So we've had conversations like that, and he's pretty solid on the fact that he's like, no, I'm a boy. Yeah. I have long hair. I'm a boy.
Yeah. And he can have, you know, long hair. Right. And he can express himself in however he wants to.
Exactly. Yeah. Like, I just let him do whatever, like, however he wants to express and present himself is what he gets to do, because I feel like children should have the right to choose that. And parents should have the right to support their children.
I'll tell you, in the 70s, like, boys had shaggy hair. Yeah. They had much longer hair.
Exactly. Yeah. Like, it was just a thing. Yeah. So, at this point in time, like, a bill like the Let Them Grow Act doesn't personally affect me.
I just gotta roll my eyes at that.
I know.
Yeah.
Because to my knowledge, my child is not trans. Yeah. As like, to my current and present knowledge. Yeah. Like, and that obviously could change at any point. Sure. But it doesn't affect me personally on this level. It hurts on a community level. Yes. To see this happen. Yes. And to see this pushed forward. Yes. And the fact that the bill got signed. Right. Because at the end...
Do you know parents of trans kids?
Not personally.
Okay.
No.
But there's probably some in this community.
Oh, yeah. There's definitely some in the community. A lot of them aren't super open about it. And honestly, I don't blame them. Yeah. One bit.
No.
I wouldn't be either if I were them.
Yeah, I mean, you have the state, the representatives of the state creating laws which are unjust, which harm people.
100%.
Yeah.
And to watch the filibuster end, because I can't remember if it was because the logistics of it, because it ran out of time, or if it was because they filed something against it. I don't remember exactly, but to watch the filibuster end, and then to watch the legislature push the bill through.
So could she just not keep it up? The
I
filibuster.
Think so.
I mean, it's exhausting. I would imagine.
I don't think it was for lack of stamina. There was something legally going on that she couldn't.
Okay, so they barred her.
I think they barred. Yeah, something happened.
Okay.
Where she could not continue.
Okay.
But it wasn't for lack of wanting, right?
Sure. I actually saw those videos and I was like, wow, this is cool.
Yeah, she's full of fire.
You don't see a lot of that from politicians right now.
You really don't.
Even the Democrats, who are supposed to be our allies, right?
Yeah.
Not seeing too much.
Not really. And to have that in a place like Nebraska.
Yeah.
Of all places.
Yeah, fucking awesome.
Where our legislature is extremely red.
Yeah.
Extremely so.
Right.
So for whatever reason, the filibuster could not continue, and they started pushing bills through just as quick as they could. And what they ended up doing was they took that Let Them Grow Act and they tacked a 12-week abortion ban onto it and shoved it through.
Of course they did.
Yeah,
of course they did.
Of course they did.
It's all about control.
Exactly, 100%. So they push it through, and the governor signed it, and it's not supposed to take effect until October 1st.
Okay.
But here's the thing: ACLU is now suing, saying that it is unconstitutional to, I think they called it log rolling, where they push two very distantly related bills together and we're just going to make this happen. Illegal.
Yeah.
In some ways. So they are now suing about it and filing for an injunction, which what a fucking relief that someone is doing something
but
to
also,
try and stop it.
There's so much happening all over the United States.
Yeah.
That I'm sure their resources are getting kind of thin.
100%.
Yeah.
And I try not to dwell on it too much, right? Because it's so easy to doom spiral into the anxiety.
Right.
But I worry a lot about if this bill is passed where they can ban gender affirming care for minors.
Right.
How long is it going to be before they ban gender affirming care for adults? How long am I going to have access to hormones before they say I can't?
Right.
How much longer is it going to be safe for me to live in Nebraska?
Right. And what bathroom can you use? And
right. I'm extremely lucky that I pass in the sense that I don't get questioned when I walk into a men's room. And I'm very grateful for that. And I'm still terrified to go in the men's bathroom in public. I hate it. I won't do it unless I absolutely have to. And it's just it's nerve-wracking.
Yeah.
And it's awful. Yeah. And I spend a lot of time wondering how long I have left to live here in Nebraska before it's just not safe for me to be here anymore. And I have to leave. Which gets complicated because my kid is here and my ex is here and my entire family, and how is that supposed to work?
Right. So yeah, especially since you're kind of renewing a relationship with your mother, which sounds like that's a really important thing.
Yeah. And it's especially complicated by the fact that my partner lives in Denver, and that's a safe place.
Yeah.
And at some point we want to close the distance because we can't do long distance forever.
Okay.
So how am I going to juggle these two incredibly important relationships between my child and my partner in different states where one is maybe not as safe for me, but the ties here are very strong, and how do I manage this? Right?
Yeah.
It's exhausting.
I know a lot of people are juggling that right now.
Yeah.
Or, do they have the finances to do it?
Because it's extremely expensive.
Yes.
Yeah.
And also just, losing things like a job, insurance. There's multiple layers to this.
Yeah.
You just don't get in a car and go.
Yeah, it's incredibly
complicated. But other people can. But I have nothing, so there you go.
It's generally just a very complicated sort of thing. And to watch all of this legislature go through, especially in other parts of the country, but watching it start up here is so nerve-wracking.
Yes.
Especially when people who I have ties to here, some of them, not all of them, but some of them, don't see it as a problem. They're like, well, it doesn't affect you. Like, it's not going to get that bad. Like, they're not going to do that. And like, you don't understand.
Yeah. They're already doing
it.
Yeah.
They've already started the process. Well, it's not going to get as bad as Florida. We are where Florida was a couple of years ago.
Right.
We're on that. This is where we're going.
This is the trajectory.
Yes.
Yeah.
Like,
I am so frustrated with that, with sort of centrists or liberals, and like they sound like they mean well, or they sound like they love you, but they're not. I don't know. I'm not seeing a lot of people stand up for us, and I'm really, I'm more scared of that than I am the right.
Oh, me too.
I'm way more scared of that.
Me too, because at least the right is in your face about it.
Yeah, I can see them coming.
I can spot them from a mile away.
Yeah.
It's the people who claim to be allies and claim to have my back, and then turn around and out me in the name of being an ally, or tell me that, like, well, it's not going to get that bad. Like, you're not going to have to do that, or like stare at me being anxious about my safety in a place that's always been my home and be like, I don't know.
Yeah, like downplay it.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's not being an ally.
No.
When you downplay what somebody's going through.
Right.
Doesn't matter what it is,
Yeah.
Yeah. Goodness gracious. You'd think that we would learn about these things after a while, but
you'd think.
Yeah. Well, that is a really hard place to end this. Let's think of I'm not trying to be like toxically positive or whatever.
Yeah.
But let's try and think of a way to round this out. I guess what is, even in this time of turmoil, what are you doing to like take care of yourself and to flourish?
Right.
Yeah. Because you're an artist.
Yeah.
You have a lot going on. Yeah.
Yeah. I have found for me personally, because I'm so sensitive to the things, like, it's so easy for me to doom spiral into that anxiety about what's going to happen and what is happening. And like, the more information I get, the farther my brain can go with creating stories, or like seeing the trajectory and reading the patterns. And it's very easy to sink into that in a place that puts me into a panic.
I can tell.
And you can't function. I know, right?
I can tell you. It's almost like you're doing it right now.
Sometimes even just talking about it, my brain's like, you know what? Let's think about how terrible everything is going to be.
Yes.
But it's one of those things that I've learned that I have to curate how much I can intake at a time, right? To know, like, to read my body, to know when my limit is, when I need to stop reading about it, or when I need to stop talking about it.
Or being online and looking at stuff.
Or like looking at suggested news articles. And there's been times where I've seen stuff and then been like, I should read this so I'm informed. And then I go, I can't handle that right now.
Maybe just read the summary.
Exactly.
Because there's organizations that it's like their job to read all this stuff, and then they kind of summarize it.
Exactly. It's about curating where my intake of that sort of news comes from, so that I can understand it and not panic. Right. So a big thing
Don't give into the reactionary tabloid thing. Yeah.
Exactly. And I know I struggle a lot with feeling like guilty or ashamed that I don't do more in the sense of like practical activism and being in the community and doing protests and, being at the courthouse to like, hold signs or something like that.
Yeah.
I feel really guilty that I don't do that. But as I said earlier, I have to be cognizant of the fact that I have a small child.
Yeah.
I live in a place where it's not exactly safe to do that kind of thing, and I have to be careful.
Yeah, with Proud Boy or whatever folks out there, Patriot Front,
exactly,
etc.
Exactly. So, over the last probably year or so, I've really tried to settle into this idea that visibility is resistance. Living and thriving is resistance.
That's right.
Right? Because they want you to be afraid. They want you to hide. They want you to be miserable and depressed and scared. And I refuse.
Yeah.
You will not make me hide.
Yeah.
I have worked too hard for this.
That's right.
I have spent too much of my life struggling and hiding and being scared and sad. I will not do it anymore. You cannot make me. I will be visible one way or another.
Well, you are very, very visible, I would say. Also, it sounds like, you're part of different kinds of communities where there's a lot of respect.
Yeah.
And you're sharing resources and ideas and that sort of thing in an arts community. That is in itself a form of activism.
Yeah.
Yeah, maintaining communities.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I've had to remind myself a lot that like art is resistance. Mm-hmm. That whole concept of like art isn't just because it was very downplayed like in my growing up. Like arts and writing and that's it's just frivolous whatever. It's not practical.
Right.
No, this is the stuff that keeps us going as humanity. Right. It is incredibly important. It is inspiring and it passes down stories and experiences in a way that history does not.
That's right.
Right? And so like on the back of that, art is resistance and also like being a parent is resistance. Because I am in the process of teaching a new generation, or at least one person in a new generation, how to be better and how to like move forward from that.
And giving them freedom.
Exactly.
Yeah. And also, I mean, your mother, it sounds like you've helped her be more liberatory in her own life.
Yeah.
Yeah.
In some sort of way that I don't exactly understand.
Yeah. And bless your friends, your non-binary friend that helped you through, you know, various hurdles that you had, you know, and that's what community does.
Exactly. You know? And that's like a really important thing that I've realized about community over the last year or so is community comes with a variety of roles.
Right.
Not everyone can be the fighters. No. I have a little post-it note in my room that it says it's okay to be a healer and not a fighter because we need both.
Right.
You have to have the people to hold the home line and to like to hold the home front and help heal and bring people back together as well as the people that go out there and fight.
That's right.
You have to have both. Otherwise it does not work.
That's right.
And I've had to...
And we need a groundswell of everybody.
Exactly.
Not everybody's going to have the same skill set.
Exactly. Community is about that mutual support, and everyone is going to play a different role. Not everyone is going to be good at the same thing, and that's why it works.
That's right. Or can handle it either.
Exactly.
Right? Yeah.
Exactly. So, like, I've had to come to terms a lot with that concept, especially in relation to masculinity, because I was very much taught that, like, being masculine is being a leader and a fighter and being, like, on the front lines. And so I've had to let go of that idea because that's not who I am as a person.
Yeah.
And having to, like, reframe my role in community as someone who is not a fighter but a healer, someone who holds the home front and tells the stories and like brings people back in before sending them out again, and that's where I feel at home.
There you go. And I think that's a good place to end. The concept of home is so difficult for a lot of queer and trans people, so you're making the home here, you know, and I love it that, you know, in this tough place, you're able to do that.
It's my best effort.
Yeah. Anyway, the sun has gone down.
I've officially lost all light.
This is probably going to be a little bit grainy at the moment. Sorry about that. You know, we just get into these conversations and, you know, I lose track of technology. Sometimes my brain, whatever. Anyway, thank you so much for meeting with me.
Yeah, thank you so much. Appreciate this.
Yeah. I love meeting wild people here in the middle of the country. Wild people doing very loving things. Yeah. All right. Bye, y'all. I'm going to be in Lincoln tomorrow, and then I have a gap, and I'm going to Salt Lake City to work for a while.
Nice.
And then I'm going back home to Alaska. For better or worse. Pray for me in whatever way that you pray. All right.